Alright guys, so this is my official first video on YouTube. I said that I was going to post my story and here we are. This is kind of awkward because I'm used to doing like live with you guys on TikTok and, just used to doing like 15 or 20-second weird, quirky videos. So this is like brand new to me. So please bear with me. Okay, so I guess we'll just start from the beginning. I'm not going to go in great detail about every little thing that happened to me because I am in the process of writing a book and I don't want to spoil a lot of things in the book. So I'll just, do like maybe like a 10-20 minute, quick overall, video. And, yeah, and I guess you just have to wait until maybe a next video, like a part 2 or, wait until the book. So, all right, let's just get into it. So I was born, February 12th, 1986. Yes, 86. I know it was forever ago for all you youngins. I know. So my mother had me when she was actually incarcerated. She was in prison herself. This was like her second term that she was serving. She was serving an 18-month term for check fraud. And she went to prison, obviously, prior for I think like 6 months for check fraud as well. So when I say that my grandparents had me, since day one, they literally had me since day one. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say that. So, the best way I can explain my childhood is if I could explain in one word my childhood, if it was just my grandparents and I, just us three, would have been amazing. They were really great, parents, grandparents to me. And, but, unfortunately it wasn't just us, my brothers was there. And so was my aunt, my 2 uncles, many cousins. And unfortunately, if I had to, summarize my childhood in one word when it comes to, my other family members, I would say sad. So, and I didn't even know that my grandparents were even my grandparents until I was like 7 or 8 years old. I remember sitting outside and I was sitting outside in a white plastic chair that my grandmother had in the back by the back doorway. And my aunt had came over. She had my 2 cousins and my cousin, my girl cousin, her daughter was the same age as me. I was only 6 months older than her, but we were in the same grade and, stuff like that. So we grew up together. We were close, but it was like a hate-love relationship, I guess you can say. A lot of jealousy, a lot of hate, a lot of envy. It was awful. And my aunt, I remember my aunt literally sitting next to me and telling me, don't ever call my mom and dad your mom and dad. That's not your mom and dad. That's your grandma and grandpa. Your mom died when he was a baby and your dad never comes around. So he might as well just be dead. And I was confused at first. I'm like, what? And I literally went inside and started, crying to my grandmother. And she sat me down. Her and my grandpa sat me down and said, yes, this is true. I remember my grandparents wanting to adopt me and like officially adopt me and change my last name. And I said no. For some reason, I don't know why I said no. I think I said no because, my aunt and my 2 uncles, which obviously was my grandparents, kids, they really hated me. They did not like me. like my aunt was just so jealous of the relationship that I had with my grandparents. And she would always, I remember always walking in on a conversation that she would have when she would come over and she would be like, telling my grandma and grandpa like, oh, well, you treat Ashley so differently than you do my kids or Ty's kids or TJ's kids. And go on and say, things like, why don't you do this for, do this for my daughter, do this for my son? Why don't you do this for, their kids? And I remember my grandmother and even my grandfather, like, repeatedly telling her, and telling, even my uncles too, like, your kids they have their mom and dad. Like, Ashley doesn't have her parents. Like, we are her parents. Like, you have to understand that. And apparently that just went over, their fucking heads. Like, they just never understood it, and they just never wanted to. And it was so frustrating. Like, I never understood, obviously I was a kid, so I never really understood why she hated me, why she was so, like, jealous of the relationship. I feel like now that I'm adult and I'm looking back, I think maybe she thought that I was taking, my mother's place. And maybe, obviously, I know now that her and my mother was, really close. And maybe she just felt a certain type of way, thinking that, I was trying to take my mother's place. And, there's only one Tracy, that's my mother's name. So, and I understand that to a certain extent, but again, I was a child, and you can't really, why would you really hate me that much? I can laugh about it now just because it's, it's funny to me, but literally back then, she made my life a living fucking hell. Okay. She would always talk, bad about me to her daughter. Even when we got, a little older, I remember walking in on several conversations she would have with her husband, her then husband, which was my step uncle. I couldn't stand him either. And, walking in on conversations that she had with my cousin, talking shit about me. Saying how much of an ugly person I was. I'm disgusting. I'm fat. Nobody's ever going to want me. And, I'm just going to end up being, a worthless piece of shit like my two older brothers. I literally heard her say that word for word. And then when we got older and, I decided to move in with her because my grandfather ended up getting lung cancer, and he decided that he wanted to die at the house, and I didn't want to be there. Like, I didn't want to see that. So, I ended up moving in with her. That was a big mistake. Big mistake. That's when my life went all the way to shits. And I remember her telling me when I was 13 years old to always look out for myself, right? To always make sure that I'm taken care of, no matter what. Make sure that the guys that I, get involved with, make sure that they're older, they're wealthy, they're financially stable, which I get as far as, like, financially stable part. Like, I would say that to my kids, like, make sure you get with somebody who is financially stable. However, telling them to make sure that they're married, and, because, married men always, pay more, to, shut you up, and, just a bunch of, a bunch of shit. Make sure that the guys, never do anything for free. And I mean anything. And this was all before I even started having sex. So anyway, speed up for, a year later, I was 14 on my, I just turned 14 actually. Me and my cousin and her friend, we all went to Shooters. It was like this pool hall in Columbus on the east side. And I recognized this guy from, from our school, from Pickerington. And he had his cousin there. And, his cousin was like 20 years old. And he was like this funny, goofy, like, weird looking guy. So I was attracted to him, he's weird looking, so I'm just attracted to weird looking people. And he asked me, he's like, do you want to go, to the dollar movie theater? There's a dollar movie theater that was across the street at the time, literally played nothing but dollar movies. So I'm like, yeah, okay, let's go. So we went across the street. We'd never made it in to see that dollar movie. We just sat in the parking lot and talked for like an hour and made out literally the whole night. So I go home, he gives me his number, and I didn't give him my number because I didn't want him calling the house because he is a lot older, and he understood that. He was like, okay, and he knew that I was 14, okay, he knew that. I didn't lie to him about my age or anything like that, like, he literally knew, and he liked it. So I should have known right then and there that he was a pedo. I just it didn't, dawn on me or anything. So I remember, 2 weeks after we started talking and everything, he had came over, he met my aunt and uncle, and he did, oh no. Okay, sorry guys. So, um, and he did meet, my aunt and uncle, and, he told my aunt and uncle how old he was. At first, we were going with, he was 17. Like we were going with that. But when he had came over, he decided to tell him his real age, 20 years old. And, they were reluctant at first. And then I guess after talking to him for a while, like he's a charmer, he could talk to you out of, he could talk you out of anything. Okay. So, they were okay with it. The stipulations were that, he can come over, we can hang out there, but I was not to go anywhere with him. Like I was not allowed to leave anywhere with him unless they knew about it. So I was like, okay. And I remember telling him, like, well, I'm about to go downstairs and play my video game, just come downstairs. Like, I had a Super Nintendo on the other side. Like, my room at the time was upstairs, and my cousin's bedroom was downstairs in the basement, but it was on the other side. And so the other side was her room, and then, to the right was like the hangout spot. We had like another little room where we had like a tanning bed, and then we had like, a futon, and then a little TV, and then the Super Nintendo and stuff like that. So that's where I was. I was on the futon. It was 7:04 p.m. and I remember the exact time because I remember looking at the clock when he came down. And, when you have a traumatic experience like this, you remember everything vividly. And it's crazy how much like you remember. I remember everything. Like it just happened today. I had on Tommy Hilfiger overalls. I had on a long sleeve white shirt. Like I said, I was playing Super Mario Brothers. It was 7:04. He had came down, sat beside me, took the remote controller out of my hand, tossed it, flung it on the floor, and he started to kiss me. He put his, hand, behind my head and started kissing me. And then he started, caressing me. He ended up, and I tried to push him off. We made out before, but this time it felt like more forceful. Like, and I didn't like that. So he, and every time I tried to push him off, it seemed like he got stronger. And so I just, stopped, and, he started to unbutton my overalls, and I kept saying, stop. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, I've never done this before. And he was like, oh, just relax. It'll be fine. And, he literally picked me up from the futon to the floor, and, he proceeded, to do, a few things, which I go in, detail, obviously, in the book. And I remember when he, pulled my overalls down, I said, no, I don't want to do this. I don't feel comfortable. I literally had my legs crossed and I had my hands like this. And he literally took my hands and put them up again, up above me, with one of his arms, and, pulled his pants down and proceeded like we had sex. It was unprotected. My first time ever having sex. I hated it. I think it only lasted for like a couple minutes. Like it didn't even last that long. It was horrible. It hurt, and I hated every minute of it. I remember when he was done, he got up, pulled his pants up. He said, okay, well, he's got to go. I remember getting up, pulling my, pants up, putting my overalls back on, and I went upstairs to the bathroom. I went upstairs before he even went upstairs. And I remember shutting myself in the bathroom. I started crying. I started cleaning up, like putting water on my face and cleaning up down there. I was bleeding a little bit. It was horrible. And I remember hearing the garage door open because there was an alarm. Like every time you open the door, it would go beep, beep. So as soon as I heard that, I just like a sigh of relief just fell over me. I remember going upstairs, going to bed. I didn't even say anything to anybody at that point. And, and the sick part about it was like, I kept in contact with him. Like I kept talking to him. He kept coming over. There was a lot of times, more than a dozen times where, I would ride the bus home, and I would, the bus would always pass, my aunt's house. So I would always look at the driveway, and if I saw his little red truck, a lot of times I would go to a girlfriend's house down the street and stay there until like 7 or 8 o'clock. Because I noticed that he would come over during the day while my uncle was at work. Okay. And I never knew why, until later on, which come to find out, he was bringing cocaine and weed to my aunt, and he was also sleeping with her. So anyway, but I noticed that he would leave around the time that my uncle would come home, and my uncle would come home like around 7 or 8. So he would be gone by like, I don't know, 6:30 or 7. So I would, leave my friend's house between 7 and 8 to make sure that he's gone so I didn't have to, deal with him. But I would still talk to him, on the phone and still hang out with him, sometimes like on the weekends if he would come over, if he would catch me, if he would come over and catch me there, you know what I mean? So anyway, one day, I think it was like my aunt and uncle's anniversary. They went out for dinner. And I remember him calling me and him saying, okay, well, I'm about to come over. He came over and he literally went upstairs. He had like 4 or 5 trash bags on him. And he said, here, start putting your clothes in this. And I'm like, what? So I did. And he's like, you're about to go with me. You're about to come with me. So I'm like, okay. Well, I was all for it because you know what? I hated my family anyway. So if I can get away from my family, I'm all for it. Okay, especially my aunt, my cousins, and my uncle. I just did not like that environment. So we ended up running away. I told my cousin, like, look, I'm about to go down the street to the store. I'll be right back. And while I was talking to her, he was putting the bags of clothes in the back of his truck. We ended up going to a hotel that night. And we didn't have sex or anything that night, but we stayed the night at the hotel. I kept, I was worried about what my aunt, and uncle was gonna say and, think. And I remember his mom calling him during the night or like the next morning or something. And she was like yelling at him. She's like, do you understand that she is, only 14 years old and blah, blah, blah. And I remember him telling her like, well, I'm saving her because, her uncle is abusing her. That's not true. Like I wanted to say that's not true, but I didn't say that. So I just went, whatever. Like I just wanted to leave anyway. So we get into the truck. We stopped at some store, whatever. He ran in. I stayed out in the car and then we took off. We were literally like, we got caught right before the West Virginia, border. The highway patrol officer ended up pulling us over. Obviously there was like an alert out for me. My aunt called the police and all that stuff. So they asked me like, well, did he kidnap you? Did he take you against your will? And I'm like, no, he didn't. Like I went. Anyway, so we went back to the police station and, my aunt and uncle had came down to get me. They were extremely pissed. I remember when I got into the car and I told her, I just broke down and said, look, he raped me. Like, this is what he did. He fucking raped me. My aunt did not say one fucking word to me. She didn't say anything to me. I remember her turning up the music and they head straight to Children's Hospital in Columbus. We went through like the emergency department and I remember the doctor had came in or the nurse had came in and asked me if, they had permission to do a rape test on me. And I said, no, like it's too late now anyway. Like this happened like, weeks ago. So anyway, I said no. And the doctor came in and my aunt was like, no, you need to we're getting one done. We're getting one done. And the doctor came in, he's like, we can't give her one. If she's saying no, we don't have her consent. That's like raping her all over again if we proceed to do it. So we're not doing it. She was so mad at me when we went back to the house. She took the door off the hinges, in my room. She took all of my makeup. Back then, like I still wear like a shit ton of makeup now, but back then I wore like a lot of makeup, like a lot of layers of foundation and powder and everything. I was so insecure and I didn't like myself. I thought I was so ugly because that's what I kept hearing from my aunt and cousin, that I was just this disgusting, ugly ass kid that nobody wanted and nobody would ever want. So I kept wearing, layers of makeup because I thought maybe that would make me look better. Maybe, they would, accept me or, like me better. I don't know. So anyways, they took my makeup from me and they would not allow me on the phone, not allow anybody to come over or me go anywhere. She literally had a tape recorder that was plugged in to the phone line. So when she would leave and I would be there by myself or be there with my cousins, every time I would get on the phone, she would come back home and she would literally listen to the whole conversation. Like they were that fucked up in the head. Anyway, so, speed up to after, that incident, I went to the doctor about a week later, got on the depot shot. This point I was like 6 weeks pregnant. And didn't even know about it, but they took a pregnancy test and it was negative. So they went ahead and gave me the depot shot, but I was indeed pregnant. And I remember after I got the shot, I had got on, at this point I was, ungrounded and all this shit. I wasn't having no conversation, with, my son's father, with Paul. Just gonna say his name, Paul, because, and I'm saying everybody's name just because, I am. Paul is a pedo. So yeah. Anyway, so, I get online into these like AOL chat rooms and stuff like that, Yahoo chat rooms, and started meeting, different guys, older guys, and it was exchange for money. And I just had this mentality that I wanted out of the environment that I was in. I didn't want to be around it. I did everything I could to make sure that I wasn't in the household, whether that's going to the mall, the movies, going to a friend's house, football games. Like, I wanted to make sure that I stayed busy, so I didn't have to be around that family. And I remember my first client. It was an older guy. He looked just like Samuel L. Jackson. It was really weird. It was awkward. But it was for $65 for some oral. And, I remember him telling me, don't ever sell yourself short. Like, don't ever do that. So, throughout the couple years, I ended up finding out I was pregnant. Obviously, like 7 months later, I was like almost 8 months pregnant with my son before I found out. And, so of course I wasn't prostituting, while I was pregnant. I gave birth to him. And, after I gave birth to him, I think it was, maybe like 3 months later, I started, doing it again. Like, the money that I would get, obviously, like, I was a minor, so I couldn't really get like, a car or, my own place or anything. But the money that I did get, I would either, buy weed with. I smoked a lot of weed back then. And I had this friend that, her and her dad would come pick me up, and we would go to the mall, and I would have like this big purse with me or this backpack with me, and we would go to the mall and just, get different things, and I would stuff them in my purse and my backpack. And, so when I came home, nobody knew that I got new things, and they wouldn't question me, like, how'd you get this, So, I remember, even during my childhood, back up to my childhood, my brothers, I have two older brothers, and they did molest me. They molested me for years. I remember my first incident, I think I was like maybe 5 or 6 years old. We lived in Yucca Valley, California at the time. And me and my two older brothers were in the garage. My second oldest had left the garage, shut the door behind him. And my oldest brother, he was sitting like on, like the edge of like this exercise bench or whatever. And he pulled his pants down, pulled his penis out, and he grabbed my hand, and he put my hand on it. And he was like, just think of it as your thumb. Just think of it as you sucking your thumb. Because I sucked my thumb, and I still do, even till this day. So anyway, so I remember him telling me that, okay? And, I started crying and screaming, and I jerked my hand, and I just ran out. And I remember running into the front door and running straight back to my grandmother's room and telling her what happened. I don't know really what happened, if she even yelled at him or punished him. I don't even know. But I do know that even that weekend, my grandparents always went to Mexico, like every other weekend. And they left me there with them, even after that incident, There was a lot of things in my childhood that I don't really remember, that is completely blacked out. Up until my older cousin ended up coming back in the picture, and him telling me some things. And then I started to remember, certain things. I started getting flashbacks of certain things. And I would ask my grandmother, and she's like, yeah, I remember you telling me that. Just a bunch of stuff. But I remember, somebody telling me that if you have a period, like a time frame of your childhood that you just don't remember, is because something traumatic happened to you. And I don't remember, I think like the earliest, obviously I remember that incident in California, and I was like, 5 or 6, but after that, like, there's only bits and pieces of my childhood that I remember. There's like a big chunk that I don't even remember, like I don't recall at all. So anyway, I feel like I started, the reasoning why for the prostitution was because I was seeking validation from older men. Like I wasn't getting it at home, obviously. Like I never had that mother and daughter, relationship. Never, my dad never came around. I didn't even know who my dad was. I didn't even know nothing about him. The first time I seen him, I was pregnant. I was pregnant with my son. I was 14 and pregnant. And he came over and he brought some presents for Christmas, and it was so awkward. It was awkward as hell. Like I'm like, who? I don't even know this guy. It's like this short fucking white hair, who looking, dude. So it was really, really awkward. He was really racist. My family is really racist. Really racist. My grandfather was really racist. I remember every time the Cosby, show would come on, I would say, tell my grandpa, like, oh, you look just like Bill Cosby, but only white, because he really did. And he's like, I remember him saying, don't ever say that shit. Like, he was really mad that I would say that all the time. But then I kept saying it just to piss him off because, that's not, I don't know. So anyway, and then my uncles, they were racist. My older uncle actually, molested my aunt, which, is his younger sister, when they were younger. My aunt used to tell me that all the time when she would get drunk. And I always thought that she was, bullshitting, because, I thought maybe she was just making up stories, because she would only say that when she's drunk. But I remember one incident where she called me up one night. She was like, look, can you come pick me up? I'm drunk. I'm too drunk. I can't drive home. I need you to drive my car back. So I think my cousin had dropped me off at my grandmother's house, which was like 30 or 35 minutes away at the time. And I remember walking into my grandmother's room. My grandmother was out in the living room, and then my uncle and my aunt was in her room, and my uncle was touching her inappropriately. And I'm like, what the fuck? And so, he hurried up and jerked away when I came in, and he wanted my aunt to stay the night. And because he wanted to stay the night with her. And even, my aunt was saying, no. And even my grandmother was like, oh, just stay the night. I'm like, what the hell? And I even told her, I'm like, you know what your son is doing in there to your daughter? And I remember her telling me, oh, don't worry about it. No, I'm worried about it. Like, that's fucked up. That's disgusting. So anyways, I remember, putting her in the car, and, we went on home. I don't like my aunt. I don't have a relationship with her now, and I never will. But, what's wrong is wrong, and that was fucking wrong. So, and I wasn't going to tolerate it. Like, that's disgusting. And me and that uncle, we don't get along. We don't have no relationship, never have, never will, that sort of thing. He's very racist. He's a disgusting animal. My other uncle, he's like a goofy kind of, uncle. I don't think that I would ever have a relationship with anybody in my family at this point. My grandmother, she passed away when I went back to prison for the second time in 2018. I remember like the warden or the chaplain calling me down to the church, and they, her telling me what happened. The warden was even going to allow me to go to the funeral. They was going to pay for the expenses and everything. And my aunt said no, she didn't want me to go. She's just an evil person. So anyway, after, prostituting, like, here and there, like I wouldn't do it every single day, obviously. Like I only had like a couple like clients, couple Johns, that's what we called them back in the day. And I would only, go to them if I really needed money. Okay. And, I remember, when I was 16, my grandfather had passed away a few years prior, and at this point I already, I had my son, and, my living situation with my aunt was completely freaking rocky and shitty. And, I remember like my big first purchase with the money that I had with prostituting was a car. I remember my grandmother, she bought like this hoopty car, okay? But she sold it, okay? She bought it for me, but like it was bad. And so we ended up putting like a for sale sign up on the, on the car in the window in front of a Mexican restaurant in Pickerington, and we sold it for $1,000. So my grandmother, said, well, you can use this money for a down payment on the car. So that's what I did. But I also had my money, which at that point, this was before, obviously, like I was, smoking weed and everything, but I wasn't buying pills. Like I wasn't, experimenting with pills or anything. So I had money, saved up. And I remember, I think I put $1,900 down on top of her $1,000. So it was close to $3,000 that I put down on the car. And my first car was a between like a 1995 and 1999 Pontiac Grand Am. It was a teal color 4-door. I love that car. I bought it outright. I didn't have any payments on it or anything, and it blew up on me. I think like maybe like a year or two later. I'd never gotten oil change on it. Like nobody told me I had to get fucking oil change on the damn thing. So anyways, I ended up, when I turned 18, I quit high school. I quit my senior year. Didn't want to go. My life living with my aunt and my cousin and going to school was hell. I remember my cousin, she had like 3 or 4 friends that she would always like hang out with. They would always come over and everything. I remember reading this letter that my cousin had wrote back and forth to her friends in school, and they were talking shit about me, calling me disgusting, and that I was nasty and I was a whore and all this stuff. And little did they fucking know I was like a paid whore. And I don't even know why they even thought that I was a whore. Like, why would you think I was a whore? Why? Because I had a kid. Like, and I even told my cousin. I remember telling my cousin after I had my son, like, that when me and Paul first had sex, like, he literally raped me. Like, he forced himself on me. And they did not believe me. I'm telling you, they did not fucking believe me. So anyway, I tried to take care of my son the best way that I knew how at the time. I'm not going to go in great detail. Like, again, I'm going to save that for my book, but just know that I wasn't ready to be a mom. I had no business being a mom. Maybe a lot of other people that are, 15, 16, 17 years old, they're capable of being a mother. I just wasn't that person. I was forced to be a mother. I didn't want to be a mother. And it wasn't fair to me, and it wasn't fair to him. And I thought I did the best thing for him, and I gave him up for adoption, placed him for adoption with his grandmother, which was his dad's mom. However, I know a lot of you are going to think, like, why would you do that? And this guy raped you. Well, let me explain. I cannot, I'm trying to figure out the words here. It's not his mother's fault what this guy did to me, okay? It's not her fault at all. I can't blame her. That's the word I was looking for, blame. I can't blame her for what her son did to me, okay? Just like, my son right now is sitting in the county jail on a murder charge. And a lot of people might look at me like, oh, like shitty mom. Well, you can't blame me for what he did. Like, I had no control over what he did, just like she had no control over what he did, that sort of thing. So, and at the time, she was this Christian lady. It was only like, she only had one son, like one child. And he wasn't even around. At this point, he was actually in prison. He did a 4.5-year sentence because of what he did to me. He didn't get charged with the rape, but he got charged with like delinquency of a minor, and then like drug charges and a series of other things. So combined, he did like 4.5 years in state prison. During that 4.5 years, though, he signed over his rights. I gave up custody to his mother, and the stipulations were set in place. Children's Services was involved because at this point, before I turned 18, I wasn't going to school. I was smoking weed. I was, I was being a party animal. And my aunt literally tried her hardest to get custody of my son. She called children's services on me saying that I'm not going to school. And at this point, I was on probation for hitting her. Long story, I'll save before the book. But, you know, I was on juvenile probation until I was like 25 years old, until I literally was in prison and they released me from juvenile probation while doing my, you know, 7-year sentence. So anyway, you know, I remember her calling children's services, them telling them that I'm on drugs, I'm not taking care of him, and I wasn't taking care of him, and I was on drugs, I was on weed. But they drug tested me. I tested, you know, positive for weed, and they took my son. But they placed my son with my grandmother. Stipulations were he was not allowed around my aunt at all or anybody in that household, because my aunt at that time, she was a sex offender because she slept with, remember back up to that shooter story where I met my baby's dad, my son's dad, and I told you I met this, you know, I recognized this guy from high school. Yeah, she slept with that guy. She had a whole relationship with him and everything. I'm gonna save it for the book, but she had like a long, like year and a half relationship with him, and he was only like 15, 16 years old. So yeah, she got caught, and she was a sex offender for 20 years. Anyway, so my son was not allowed around that family. My uncle, he had domestic violence against him and my aunt, and against him and my younger cousin. And it was just like a whole mess. Like I said, that whole family is a complete fucking shit show. Complete wreck. So, you know, speed up to, you know, when I was 18. So I was in, you know, school for, you know, medical school. And, you know, I remember getting a hold of a doctor's DEA number. And I started calling in my own scripts. At this point of time, I, you know, just gave up, you know, custody of my son. I feel like a complete total shit, piece of shit. And my aunt, my grandmother, my cousin, my uncle, everybody hated me for when I gave my son up. They fucking hated me. Oh man, I was all kinds of pieces of shits in the book, everything. And so I was calling in prescriptions for myself for, you know, back then you can call in prescriptions for Vicodin, and then I actually wrote prescriptions for perks, oxys, everything. I did that for a while, ended up getting caught, obviously, caught shit ton of charges. Not gonna go in complete detail, you gotta wait for the book, but if you know, you know. I ended up doing like all together in the county jail like 14 months. Like I would, you know, stay for like 3 or 4 months at a time. My bond, literally when I was in jail, my bond, because I caught charges in different counties. I remember my bond being as low as $150 in Franklin County, and nobody would bond me out. Not one fucking time. Like they wouldn't bond me out. But I remember my aunt going to jail and her bond was $5,000. And yeah, my grandmother was trying to bond her out. Like, okay, but she couldn't pay my $150 bond, but that's cool. And every time her son, my uncle, would go to jail, she would always try to bond him out too. So, you know, but that's neither here or there. But you know, you get my point, right? You get my, yeah. So, you know, I remember after I was released, like I was released on bond, I had to go to rehab. At this point, you know, I got pregnant with my daughter, and, you know, my attorney kept, you know, rescheduling, my court hearing, you know, pushing it away because of my pregnancy. So I guess like you can have like 3 continuances. So that's what, you know, they did. And every 3 was like every 3 or 4 months. So it worked right on time. After I had my daughter, shortly after, I remember I got a sentence and they wanted to send me to rehab at first. And so we went to rehab. It was in Portsmouth. I only stayed for 2 months. I hated, you know, being there. I made up this whole big lie. I'm not going to say what it was. I obviously wait for the book. It was a fucked up lie that I made up. And my caseworker drove me all the way to Columbus from Portsmouth because of that lie, dropped me off at my grandmother's and left, and I ended up taking off. Me and my daughter took off. And yeah, I had a probation violation like a couple days later. And then my prison sentence was intact. I had to do my 7 years. I had like a 14 months. Actually, at that point, it was like a 16-month credit because they did count the 2 months that I was in rehab. So I had to do like a little under 5. I had to do like my last part of my sentence in a halfway house. And when I was released, as soon as I stepped foot in that halfway house, within like a week time frame, after I guess like the first week, like you're on lockdown, you can't have no phone calls, can't go anywhere or nothing. After that first week, I was out there, prostituting. I ended up meeting this guy. I got a cell phone. I didn't tell him I was a prostitute. This particular guy, actually, like he just, I don't know, like he got off the bus. I remember him getting off the bus and I walked past him and he literally came up to me and started talking to me and stuff. And I guess I talked my way into a cell phone. I can't really remember how, but anyway, so that happened. But I'm not going to go in great detail. I talked about this on my live earlier, but this is when the kidnapping and the beating and one of the rapes had happened during me being in the halfway house. After I got released, from the halfway house in April, actually it was April 22nd of 2011. I remember the exact date because it was my grandmother's birthday. And I got pregnant with my daughter shortly after. And it was by this guy that I had known. He was an older guy, but he wasn't a John. Yeah. He was another disgusting guy. I guess you could consider him a John, but he never like gave me money or anything. I just, he was just a place to stay, I guess you could say. But anyways, I got pregnant. I was scared, like I just, here it is, my third fucking pregnancy, I have my shit together. It was just horrible. Long story short, I called my grandmother, like, hey, I need to come, can I please come back there? I begged her. I'm like, I want to get, my daughter back, Nessa back, my oldest daughter, like, please. And so she's like, all right. And at this point, my other aunt had my daughter, Janessa. She was taking care of her while I was, in prison. My daughter went with me while I was in the rehab though. Like that's where, Portsmouth, you could take your kids and stuff. So, my aunt ended up getting temporary guardianship while I was in prison. And I remember her telling me, she wrote me a letter saying, as soon as you get out, I'll give her back to you, blah, blah, blah. Well, she didn't want to do that. She did not want to do that. She literally wanted to keep her until she was 18. I said, are you fucking insane? Listen, just because I gave up, placed my son up for adoption doesn't mean I want to do this with my kid. Like, this is not a fucking pattern here. Like, this is just not what I want to do. Like, you are literally insane. So she didn't want to give her back to me. So when I went back to my grandmother's house, I literally had to file, to get the guardianship dismissed, lifted, or whatever you want to call it, in Franklin County. We went to court. This was like a 3-month process, literally. We went to court. The judge didn't make his decision right then and there, but I remember him telling my aunt, and I call her my aunt, but she's not really my aunt. She was married to my uncle, but they divorced many moons ago, but I still, say my aunt, okay? And my daughter considers her aunt, so I'm just leave it at that. I remember the judge telling her that it doesn't matter, like, if she's like a better mother figure, better mother than I am, whatever. But, I never did harm to my daughter. He asked her if there was any sexual abuse, any physical abuse, anything like that. And she said no. And he's like, well, then there's no reason for her not to have her, her kid. So, I remember a week later, he made his decision within a week. I remember calling up to the courthouse every single day. Did the judge make a decision? I remember calling up, I think it was like on the 3rd day, and the clerk said, yeah, he made his decision. He granted in your favor. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. Can I come up there and get that paper so I can get my daughter? Like, I didn't want to wait till I got the paper, in the mail. So she said, yeah. So I went up there, got a copy of it. I went to, the Whitehall Police Department because I knew that she wasn't going to give me my daughter Like, I just knew. Even with a court order, like, I just knew. So I went to my daughter's school. I remember, picking her up. She was all excited. She ran to me. At this point, she was in first grade. She was 7 years old, and we went back to my aunt's house and to get her clothes and stuff. And she would only give me a couple of her clothes. Like, she wouldn't give me anything, really. So I remember going back to my grandmother's house, and my grandmother was so nice enough to, give me money to get clothes for her and stuff like that. At this point, I was trying to stay on the right path and leave that kind of lifestyle alone. Here and there, I would call up, a friend, and, they would give me money. But it wouldn't be like no sexual favors involved. Like, it would just be like, here, here's some money, I'm looking out for you, kind of thing. Now, I ended up meeting my ex-husband in January of 2012, like a month before I gave birth to my daughter. And we got married. Literally, we met in January of 2012. I gave birth to my daughter February of 2012. I got pregnant with my son in March of 2012. And we got married in April of 2012. Like, we got married within like a 3-month time frame. It was insane. We never should have been married. We was not compatible, nothing in common. He was just not my type. I wasn't his type. It was just a horrific experience. So, after I got pregnant with my son, I had him when I was like 9 or 10 weeks early. I remember I was in, having contractions. I had a history of preterm labor. I went to Mount Carmel East. They even did a ultrasound scan on me and said that I was 36 weeks along. So they ended up taking me to the delivery part of the, of the hospital. And I remember my son was in my canal for like 20 minutes. They were waiting for my doctor. Like, I guess my doctor was like in rush hour or whatever. And it took him 20 minutes to get to the hospital. I could feel my son's head in between my legs for like 20 minutes. They told me not to push or anything. So because he was in my birth canal for so freaking long, the pressure in my birth canal caused, a lot of pressure and caused fluid to build up on his brain. So he had a hard time. Like, when he was born, he was only 4 pounds 4 ounces. Like, he was tiny. And they're like, wow, like, he's not 36 weeks. Come to find out, yeah, no shit, he was like 31 weeks. And he wasn't eating right. So they ended up doing a CAT scan on him and find out they had water on the brain. So anyway, I didn't get pregnant with my baby boy until like 2015. Actually 2014, sorry. I had him in 2015. And then, during like my whole marriage with my ex, like, he slept upstairs in the bedroom. I slept on the couch. That was the kind of relationship. He was talking to other girls. I was talking to other guys. Like, it was bad. It wasn't even a marriage. It wasn't even a relationship. It wasn't a friendship. It was nothing. And he didn't even contribute to anything. Like, he wasn't working during our whole marriage. I didn't have a legitimate job, nothing. So anyway, now the end of 2015, okay, I had my son in March of 2015. The end of 2015, I started prostituting again. I was, meeting guys off of Facebook, that sort of thing. Still Backpage was still a thing back then. And, I in Craigslist as well. And I remember my grandmother had gave me her car, but she wanted her car back. So I had to get my own car, and I ended up getting a Toyota Sequoia. It was in my grandmother's name though, because at this point, like, I had like a couple cars that were repoed and everything, but I had the down payment for it, obviously, from, prostituting. And so she put it in her name. She didn't have a problem with it. And so that was, my car. And then, after, I would say, okay, let me back up. So after I, I had babies back to back, I gained a shit ton of weight. I know a lot of you are probably wondering, like, oh, was you big throughout, like, the whole time you were prostituting? Like, on and off for 20 years? No. Most of the time I was chubby, I was thick, but I wasn't big. I didn't even get big until like 2000. Well, like big, okay? And prostituting on top of it. Like I was big before, like when I first went to prison, before I went to prison the first time, but I wasn't like prostituting right before I went to prison, right? So I was like severely on pills, and I was calling in my scripts for my own pills, so I didn't have to prostitute really. And I was on the run, and it was just, anyway, so well, when after I gave birth, obviously, to my baby boy, when I started prostituting again, the end of 2015, I was big. I was like almost 400 pounds. But I was actually making more money. It seemed like bigger than I was smaller. Like it was kind of weird. But anyway, speed up to like April of 2016, I started getting on, my diet, starting using my diet pills, lost 100 pounds in 6 months, like that sort of thing. And then in November 2016, I decided that enough was enough. I couldn't stand being with this man, being with my husband. I tried leaving him numerous times. He just wouldn't leave, or he would say that he was going to kill himself. And I felt bad, and I didn't want that for my kids. So I would say, okay, we'll just work on our marriage. Big mistake. But anyway, in November 2016, I ended up, leaving the house for a week, literally a week. I left until my ex-husband, my husband, until he left the house. I called him and I said, look, I'm not coming back until you leave the house, physically leave the house. I can't do this anymore. So he calls his mom, she comes and picks him up, and I come back home. And the biggest mistake was not kicking him out, but moving in my ex. My ex was this really bad crackhead, meth head, really bad person. And I ended up getting pregnant with his baby in January of 2017. I lost the baby at 4.5 months due to my drug use, obviously. And I never had a miscarriage before, so I think it really set me off the edge. I started going really crazy, started going into like a meth psychosis. Like I started just using a shit ton of meth and crack and just heroin and just everything. And my kids did not need to be in my custody. They did not need to be in my care. They needed to get the hell out of that house. I remember right before, sorry, my phone keeps I need to charge my phone. Anyway, so I'm gonna hurry up and try to wrap this up. And it's been almost an hour. I just keep talking. So, I remember right before I had my miscarriage, I went to the hospital in Lancaster, and he was supposed to watch my kids, and he fell asleep on the fucking couch. And my kids got outside, the police were called, CPS got involved. They didn't take my kids then, but like I think this was like in March, a month later, in April of 2017. That's when the indictment came back for child endangerment. I got charged, and so did he. And I remember the cops coming at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and here comes CPS too, because I was going to jail and I didn't have nobody to take the kids. And so my cousin ended up taking all of my kids. She had 3 kids of her own, and then I had my 4. So she had 7 fucking kids. I'm pretty sure she was about to go fucking crazy. And it took my ex-husband 2 weeks to come down to actually get, my 3 babies. Now, between like 2017 and 2018, I was in and out of jail like every other month. I ended up losing my kids. I lost my home. I was completely homeless. I was completely broke. My relationship with this guy was, completely to shit. So I lost the baby. It was really bad. Like I said, I started using a lot of, meth and crack and heroin then. Like I was going through like a drug psychosis. It was terrible. So terrible. So, we ended up on the west side of Columbus. I didn't know anybody. Okay. He knew everybody because that's where he's from. That's his stomping grounds, but I didn't know anybody. He would literally leave me at his uncle's house. His uncle was in jail at the time, so his cousin was staying there. He would literally leave me at that house and go, do his thing. And, it got to the point where I'm like, like, I'm sick at this point. Like, I was literally a fucking complete junkie. And so I started street walking. That's what I started doing, and did what I knew I known best. And what that was sleeping with men for money. But this time it was like a different experience. This is when, a lot of like rapes happened, attempted rapes. It's when the stabbing happened. Not going to go into detail. I talked about it on my live, but just wait until the book, or maybe I'll do like a second video. But I did this for like a year. Okay. I was also stealing cars at this point, literally stripping cars, going to different car lots. And I'm always saying this because I already got caught and did my time. So I would go to different car lots, get dressed up and everything, and go test drive these vehicles. And I would have, somebody that would either buy the cars for a half price, or, they would change the VIN number, and, then I would sell it to somebody else. So, even though I was selling it for half the price, I would still have to, pay for, other people. Like, I would have to pay for the person who swiped the VIN number and all that stuff. So anyway, and every bit of money that I made from doing that, from stealing cars to prostituting, like went up my veins. Every last dime of it. Doses happened. I remember my first overdose was in December, a couple days before Christmas in 2018. I overdosed at his uncle's house, my ex's uncle's house. Again, his uncle was in jail. His cousin was there, so it was him and his cousin and a couple other people. I ended up overdosing in the front living room. I woke up to him dragging my fucking body outside in the alley. I was completely soaked. It was in, winter. It was fucking like a blizzard outside. I was completely cold. If I didn't had waken up when I did, I would have died from hypothermia. And so I remember telling him, like, you know what? Karma's a bitch. Karma's a bitch. Like, you're going to get yours. Something's going to happen to you. Watch. And, speed up to this past February 8th. I guess he overdosed. And whoever he was with left him, and he passed away. So, you got to be careful on what you do to people, what you say to people. Like, karma is really a fucking thing, okay? Anyway, so what made me get out of prostitution was I wanted a different life. When you have so many years of regrets, so many years of feeling disgusting, feeling nasty, worthless, hopeless, you wasn't worthy of anybody's love or affection, and just a lot of things happened. I was tired of being talked to by men like they did. I was tired of being judged. I mean, you're gonna be judged regardless, but like that kind of judgment is a completely different level. I was just tired of living that fucking life. Like, I wanted a better life for my kids. I wanted a better life for me. I remember when I met my wife, I knew that she was the one. She was my person. She was the person that I was meant to be with. And I knew, like, in order for us to have like a healthy, long-lasting relationship, I had to quit drugs and prostitution, especially prostitution. Like, who wants their partner, sleeping with all kinds of Tom, Dicks, and Harrys, like, nobody would. I know I wouldn't. So I know if I wouldn't, I know she wouldn't. So I remember I ended up overdosing December 16th of 2018. I actually went into work. We both work at Taco Bell at the time. And we just got our studio apartment. And I went into work high. And she told me to call off work because you could tell when I'm high. And I said no. So I went into work. They knew I was high. They fired both of us, told us to go home. And I ended up overdosing that night. She Narcaned me. And I remember literally seeing my mom and grandmother looking, like, literally hovering over me. And they're both dead. So that scared the shit out of me. I never wanted to see that again in my life. The next morning, I woke up at 4:30 in the morning, walked my ass to that damn methadone clinic. Walked back and forth. We lived 2 miles from that methadone clinic. And I remember doing that for months. And I knew that I had to also quit prostitution. And honestly, when I quit prostitution, it was more of a struggle than drugs. Like, drugs, I was able to get on methadone. Like, right now, I'm on Suboxone. Okay, I switched from methadone to Suboxone last year in November. But, there's not a pill that you can take for quitting prostitution, okay? And then also, you have flashbacks of things that happened to you. PTSD is a thing. Night terrors, like literally screaming in my sleep, literally waking, my daughter up. My daughter would hear it and my wife would hear it. And I didn't even know I was doing it until they, told me, like, you're screaming in your sleep. What? No. But yeah, like I said, and then it got to the point to where I started waking myself up. So, and even till this day, I still struggle with being intimate, being affectionate, touching and hugging and all that stuff. Like I really do struggle with it. And I'm not saying that every single person that gets into this lifestyle is going to struggle with what I struggled with. I'm just simply telling my story, sharing what happened to me and what could possibly happen to you even after you stop this. This really happens. And, I guess my message is, for young boys and girls and, even, young, grown women, men, whomever that is either considering this lifestyle, please really think about it. Really think about it. Like it really turns you into a completely different person. Even if you just wanted to do it for a couple times to either like get your first, get a car or get the hell out of your parents' house. That was my reason at first. But it really sucks you in. It really does. And it's just like a drug. It's worse than a drug. It's worse than a fucking drug. If I had to go back and do it all over again, I would change so much. I really would, but unfortunately I can't do that. So I just have to learn how to deal with it, and hopefully that my mistakes my kids don't make, and I'm going to make sure that I do everything that I can on my end to give my kids a better childhood than I had, and to make sure that I'm financially stable on my end so my kids would never have to struggle with anything. Right now, my wife, she works at a distribution center. She makes really good money. I'm a stay-at-home mom right now. I did, work like this whole entire time from 2018 until, like about a month ago. I worked at the Hilton Hotel. I was making, all right money, but, when I got back on my diet pills, I started, selling the diet pills, with Truby. And so I make pretty good money, doing that. So that's what I do right now. I'm a 1-star director with Truby. I also am a full-time college student studying my bachelor's in science in psychology and addictions. I am going to be switching it to social work though. And, I'm just living the life that I should have been living this whole time. We live in a beautiful house. Every single thing that I have in this house, I literally worked my ass off for. Not literally, but what I mean by that is I legitimately worked it. Nothing was ever given to me. I didn't sleep with anybody for anything in here, so that means a lot to me. And I just want to, I would never even think for 1 second going back to that life. I've worked so hard to get where I'm at in life today, and I'm proud of myself. I still have like a lot of work to do, obviously. Like I went in counseling for a couple years. Like I'm in counseling now, but it's like a once a month thing, like whenever I need her kind of thing. So yeah, but right now I'm also, writing my book. I'm still, in my early childhood. It's a long fucking book. It's going to be a long book. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I know it's kind of like awkward and weird because I'm like talking to myself for like over an hour. So yeah, maybe I'll do like a part 2 on, certain things that happened to me during my prostitution. Like a lot of things happened. Like I said, kidnapping, beaten, attempted rapes, stabbing, like, getting picked up by an undercover, just a lot of things. And I go in great detail in my book. And of course I changed everybody's name in the book, so nobody can sue me, which, everything's true anyway that I'm saying in the book. So anyway, so yeah, hopefully you guys, thank you for listening, and until next time.